So, guys, Dr. Abati has boldly come out to say that Tinubu committed an impeachable offense by suspending Governor Fubara. We all know that there is a process to all this, and you don't just come out to declare a state of emergency, suspending a sitting governor without following the right process, So it's really so, shocking to see how Tinubu went all out on Fubara, sparing Wike. But apart from that, people are saying that Tinubu lacks the constitutional power to remove Fubara, And let me just allow you to take a look at why Dr. Abati, who has really explained it from a lawyer point of view, you need to take your time and listen to why he said Tinubu has even committed an impeachable crime. An impeachable offense. So he's saying he doesn't know if the National Assembly will have the boldness to even impeach Tinubu himself because he went overboard. Let me allow you to take a look at what Dr. Abati has got to say. Take a look.
Section 11 of the same constitution says that, look, when there is a state of emergency, it's only the National Assembly that can make laws for a state House of Assembly. Now, President Tinubu has appropriated unto himself the powers to make laws for the River State House of Assembly. That's an impeachable offense. I don't know whether the National Assembly will have the courage either to reject his gazetted proclamation or to proceed on an issue of impeachment against him for violating the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, the other relevant portion of the Constitution is Section 188. Section 188 of the Constitution spells out how a governor can be removed from office. A governor cannot be removed from office by the proclamation of the President of Nigeria. It can only be removed if there is gross misconduct, as put as an allegation by the House of Assembly, and then the CJ is advised to form a panel of reasonable people, people of distinguished qualities in the state. And if that panel now decides, within the purview of Section 188, that those allegations are wrong, that puts an end to that process. The president has not followed that. He has acted unilaterally. Section 1, subsection 2 of the same constitution says that this country, called Nigeria, cannot be governed except by the provisions of the constitution. There is no provision in the 1999 constitution that says that the president of Nigeria can unilaterally remove a governor, remove the deputy governor, remove the legislature of a state in Nigeria. So that proves that this is a violation of the Constitution. I go to the third leg of my analysis, which is to say that who advised the president? The people who advise the president must be called to order. Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, is a very distinguished lawyer. I don't understand how Lateef Fagbemi, SAN, arrived at this advice. And I also say that retired Vice Admiral Ibokete Ibas, if he's a patriot and a citizen, he must reject this appointment, making him sole administrator of River State, because it is a wrong appointment and his own integrity has been called to order. Whatever may be the motivations, he must act as a citizen and issue a statement forthwith to say that he will not be party to the violation of the Constitution. Now, what argument are they putting up? It has been said that, Obasanjo did this when he was president. After all, he removed Dari in Plateau, he removed Fayose in the Ekiti. Look, at that time, Akinolu Jimi, SAN, who was Attorney General, was relying, I think, on the 1960 Constitution. The explanation that he offered that the 1960 Constitution And the emergency, the Declaration of State Emergency Act of 1961 allowed the federal government to remove a governor or remove a legislature. Now, it was wrong. Because at the time it was making that statement, with due respect, the operative law in Nigeria was, either the 1999 Constitution. So Akinolujimi saying it was 1960 Constitution, 1961 Declaration of Emergency Act was just using political expediency to justify the illegality that President Obasanjo engaged in. And people who are quoting the Obasanjo president must realize that an armed robber cannot say that because one armed robber got away with it, so you also have a right to commit armed robbery. That is wrong. The second point that I would like to make, again with due respect, is that people have been referring to the Jonathan period, that Jonathan declared a state of emergency in about 3 states of the Federation, Adamawa, Borno, I think Yobe. Now, that argument has been settled by Mohammed Bello Adoke, who was Attorney General of that time, in his book, The Burden of Service. I don't remember the specific pages. But as a reviewer of that book, I reviewed that book on the back page of this. I recall that Mohammed Adoke argued that there's nowhere in the Constitution that the president is empowered, that's 1999 Constitution, that the president is empowered to remove a sitting governor or remove a sitting House of Assembly. And that was why under President Jonathan, no governor was removed, no deputy governor was removed, no state House of Assembly was sacked, no local government chairman was even removed in those 3 states. So the people who are just making argument about president, they are speaking out of ignorance. And I recommend Adoke's book for them to find that explanation.
Politics in Rivers State. But now the president has come out saying that he was declaring a state of emergency in Rivers State, and by that declaration, he was suspending the governor, his deputy, and the state assembly. He nominated a retired admiral to act as administrator of the state, and he said that he was invoking the powers conferred on him by Section 305, Paragraph 5 of the Nigerian 1999 Constitution as amended, and that was what empowered him to declare the state of emergency. He said his ultimate aim was to restore law and order to Rivers State. Well, with me in the studio is Arise Director of News, Sumner Sambo. Sumner, what do you make of this? This is quite earth-shattering.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charles. And it's good to know that the president decided to come to a conclusion, at least for a decision to be taken, not just waiting for the situation to just go out of hand. But despite the decision that has been taken, a lot of people question the legality of the president actually appointing an administrator for the state, because first of all, the National Assembly needs to be notified. And we had seen this previously where during the Jonathan administration, when state of emergency was being prodded in Adamawa and other states, the National Assembly, actually, specifically the Senate, said it had not been notified and all of that. But now the president has gone ahead not just to declare a state of emergency, but of course to push aside the governor, the deputy, and then of course the State House of Assembly by saying that the state judiciary will still be in place. Now, there are also a school of thought and people who had gone round to challenge the powers of the president to actually step aside the governor and the deputy, like in this instance, elected authorities in the state, saying that the Constitution never at any point in time, in full interpretation or understanding of Section 305, meant that the governor will ever lose his term or be removed from his or her position, but that even when there's a state of declaration or a martial law, like the president has done, that the military and civilian authorities will work side by side, not that the governor will totally be taken out of the position. But the president, in his own wisdom, alongside his legal team, have decided to evoke what actually happened during the time of Obasanjo, when we actually saw state governors being removed and being stepped aside. So there will be a lot of legal disputes, and then people will want to get the Supreme Court's interpretation. And of course, once this issue gets to the National Assembly, don't forget this state is an opposition state, that of the PDP. The PDP federal lawmakers would want to interrogate the president's desire and decision to swiftly declare a state of emergency, and to know if indeed other measures had been put in place before this. Because we heard from one of his ministers, as at last week, Nyesom Wike, during a media chat, when he was asked if there would be no consequences due to some of the statements that he had made, that some of the militants may go and blow pipelines. And he said, anything, they could just go ahead and do whatever they want to do, but that they are not the only ones. That's when he made his statement on Ijaw, to which he recanted during the weekend, saying that he didn't really mean it the way it was said.
And do you think it was that vandalization that triggered the
president's because you would have heard him saying that the governor did not intervene after the pipelines were blown up. And now we've heard about 2 of the pipelines got blown up, and there are still plans by some of these militants to actually blow up. Now, the blowing up of the pipelines are not targeted at the Nigerian state, but it's to send a message to the president that he seems not to be doing anything so much to contain the political violence from the standpoint of a commander-in-chief taking the decisions. And some people would want to also question the president's decision. If this has been going on, what did he do to counter his own minister? Because these are 2 groups of people fighting. Now, the governor, if you heard the president's speech, everything seems to be on the governor. Failed to do this. The governor demolished the State House of Assembly. What of the other party? The Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, Nyesom Wike, whose name has been mentioned off and on, including by the anti-state actors that blew up these pipelines. So what did the president do about it? And that's where I have a fear that when this issue gets to the Senate, there will be a tough debate, and people may say that the president failed to actually deal with the other side, that's Minister Nyesom Wike, because some of the actions he may or may not have taken, led to the actions being taken by the governor. So what are the sanctions for the minister himself?
And is there any indication from what he said that he was actually listening to the voices of the people of Rivers State? I'm wondering what the reaction to this will be there.
Yeah, it's going to be a very difficult one. He has been meeting with a lot of groups, including the elders of the state. Just last week, he had a meeting with the Pan-Niger Delta Forum, a group of collective leaders from the Niger Delta, where he still sent a message that they should go back home and resolve these issues. And this is not to say that Governor Fubara himself doesn't have a challenge here. He has a very big challenge because he's the chief executive of the state. And that's why you see that the president too is being politically smart by actually putting the troubles at his doorstep. Because no one elected Minister Nyesom Wike as someone who is holding forth for Rivers people. He's only an appointee of President Tinubu in the government. So whatever starts and ends in Rivers State is actually on the threshold of the governor being the executive. Now, if the governor went ahead to demolish the State House of Assembly building, actually, to be fair to the president, the governor should have done something since that time to ensure that the State of Assembly building has been erected. Though he created a temporary place at the government house where he said there could be meeting. But considering the political differences that they've had, it will be very difficult for the legislature to be meeting within the ambience of the executive's building. And so that's why you've seen these issues. Now, not quite long ago, some coalition of Rivers people and then civil servants had actually said that they were giving the State House of Assembly 24 hours for them to reconvene, and then for the governor to be allowed to present his budget. Because the talk is that the State House of Assembly members were evading the presentation of the budget, and they said that they had, adjourned indefinitely. So all of this created this sort of atmosphere. But a lot of people will question the sort of advice that President Tinubu is giving by the Attorney General of the Federation. Because I remember when people like Murtala Nyako and all of that were in 2014, when President Jonathan had wanted to declare a state of emergency in those states, like Adamawa and so on, and Borno, it was the same set of people who were in the opposition then, President Tinubu and all of that, and his party members who were forming the APC and all of that, who objected to a state of emergency be declared, and saying that even if a state of emergency were to be declared in those states, that the chief executive officers must be in place. Because the Constitution never anticipated at any point in time that the chief executive should stay away. And some of them brought some sort of arguments that what if the problem is, within the entire federation? Would the president be set aside because there's a because there's a state of emergency, and then a military person will be called upon to come and hold forth and govern Nigeria for like 6 months that the president has said? Then before the president is now allowed to take back his power, will he recover that 6 months later on after his time, or how would that be? Right. And these are the questions that people will be asking. If you're saying the chief executive to be set aside, what will he do after the 6 months?
Beyond the questions, what sort of action can anybody take against this? Is there a legal recourse?
Yes, a lot of people will seek legal interpretation, because I know some people went to court about these issues where they question, and some of the judges, I think in lower courts, had already issued judgments where they had said that the Constitution at no time anticipated that an elected governor would lose his term for a second or anything. I mean, Charles, you and I know we've seen the state of emergencies being declared in the US every now and then, maybe due to one issue or the other, including weather emergencies and all of that. We don't see governors being asked to step
aside.
Although
in fairness, those declarations are due to sort of act of nature, emergence.
Yes, and
not,
all
not
of that.
Political.
Yes, but even if it comes to political, that's what the argument of this other group of people are saying, that in the Western democracies that we copy, you don't see things happening like this when an elected governor will be set aside. But what will happen is that the elected governor will work alongside the martial law that's been put in place to ensure that the problems are resolved, because even after the duration of the martial law, the same government will still have to work with the same chief executive to resolve the issues. So a lot of constitutional interpretations will come to play here. But like I said, it's commendable that the president has taken an action. Whether the action is right or wrong, is what will be left for lawyers, politicians, and all of that. But not taking any decision before now is what was actually terrible. And of course, as commander-in-chief, you can't just wait and see one state, being brought to. But the other side of it is that, must the president wait until pipelines are blown before this kind of decision is taken?
Well, the president would argue that he did try to intervene politically, and that didn't appear to work, and then things worsened from there. But we're starting to get reactions now. We've got the Ijaw Youth Council worldwide. They're saying that they reject in its entirety the declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State by President Tinubu. That's the first one to come through. I expect there'll be a torrent of reactions pouring in as the day sort of
like I said, the political forward. Dynamics of this is the APC-led federal government declaring a state of emergency in a PDP-led state.
There are political ramifications.
Yeah, and then of course an APC minister is involved. We didn't see or hear of any punitive sanctions against the APC minister. But of course, there are sanctions against the PDP-led executive in the state. So, people will start questioning, aren't there political undertones to this? And then, of course, is this the best solution? Could there have been a better way of getting results? And I will tell you that there would have been a better way of getting results than this state of emergency.
And of course,
it just seems like the easiest thing to do. But what the president needed to have done is actually to have, I don't think that this issue went beyond a lot of,
political,
give and take.
Potential political solution.
I mean, you give some, you take some, and I don't think that the president gave enough to the governor to make him comfortable to be able to, push aside certain things.
To buttress the point you're making further, I mean, there are text messages coming through saying that this sounded like a catalogue of accusations against the governor of Rivers State, Sim Fubara. But just looking at the action that the president has now taken, he's appointed an administrator, Vice Admiral Ibas, retired. What do we know about him?
Well, he used to be one of the service chiefs, the former chief of naval staff, and he's someone from the region, and he's from Akwa Ibom State. And I think he's someone who will be able to actually, govern the state.
And he'll be seen as someone who's down the middle, is he? He's
Yes,
not like
he doesn't have a
leaning
lot of
to one side or the other.
and all of that. I mean, it was a very good thought by the president to have him, because he doesn't have political leanings to the left or right. He's a military man, a very core military person, and he's enjoyed a very good military career. And he served under the then government of President Buhari. And so he's got a very good record. And this is not the first time. I mean, in the 60s, we've had state of emergencies being declared. And of course, in the 90s, of course, we had that under military. And then, of course, we had that under Obasanjo too, before these issues of constitutional interpretations and all of that came in.
Well, I mean, the administrator, according to the president's speech, will not be able to make any new laws, but he will be free to formulate regulations as may be, quoting the president directly, as may be found necessary to do his job. I am assuming that in the current circumstances, does this now supersede the order of the Supreme Court preventing River State allocations from going to River State? I mean, because he's obviously going to need to keep the money of the state ticking over in order to get the job done and keep the services functioning.
Well, I think, Charles, you've come to that angle I was trying to come to eventually. The president played smart by trying to make sure that there's no anarchy in the state when eventually at the end of the month, no salaries are paid. And of course, River State workers will protest, and then there'll be a disruption of services. So with what he has done now, he has skillfully created a political atmosphere that will allow the federal government to disburse funds to the state, and staff salaries will be paid, and other things will go on without disobeying the Supreme Court, and then of course, without making it look like he is for the state governor and all of that. So it's a very smart game that the President Tinubu actually played here. With what has happened now, he will be able to disburse funds to them, because, I mean, the state must, keep on running. But if the old order, as in the old order with Governor Fubara, the State House of Assembly still in place, had been still in place, it will have been pretty difficult for the federal government to release funds. So now, what has happened is for the for the Federal Executive Council to sit as the executive for River State and then go ahead to do other things. Now, these are some of the things that we expected the National Assembly to have done, because this same constitution gives the National Assembly powers to take over the function of the River State House of Assembly. If the National Assembly had taken over the functions of the River State House of Assembly, we wouldn't be in this situation. So that's why I said the APC itself has questions to answer, the APC-led federal government. Why was it difficult for an APC-led National Assembly, for Godswill Akpabio, as the President of the Senate, to work within the challenges that they've had, to actually see that a solution is found? Because one of the things that he had earlier said was that that's the Senate President, that there were some court judgments that barred him and the National Assembly from taking over the functions. Okay, so when those court judgments were discharged eventually, why was it difficult for the National Assembly to take over the functions of the State House of Assembly and act as the State House of Assembly of River State, and eventually create an atmosphere that will be easier to liaise with the executive in the state and then run the state smoothly without coming to this last resort?
Well, beyond what the president said, which, as I said, we're getting text messages, people already saying, we reject this, it's a catalogue of accusations against the governor and so on. From your sort of assessment point of view, because he not only suspended the governor and his deputy, he also suspended the state assembly. I mean, would you say that both sides have lost out politically, or one side?
Well, I think the state governor actually lost out more because the State House of Assembly have been on and off. I mean, you've been seeing them, like of recent, they just declared that they had gone on indefinite, you know, they had gone off indefinitely, indefinite recess. I mean, that's the right word. And so I think the state executive is the one that is the biggest loser here. And this is not to also absolve Governor Fubara of some of the challenges. He's a neophyte when it comes to governing a state. And if he had had some prior experience politically, it would have been easier for him to be able to resolve some of these political problems. But because of his lack of political exposure, we've seen this happening and culminating in the executive powers being removed from his hands. So as far as I'm concerned, he's the biggest loser here because there are a lot of discretionary powers given to you as a chief executive officer of a state, and there are ways to win, you know, over your opponents. And in this instance, if it were Wike who was the state governor and this was happening, he would have divided the State House of Assembly and have some people for him and have some people who are against him. But the president too was trying to be smart because in my own thinking, I think that President Tinubu had some sort of sympathy, some minor sympathy, while the majority of the sympathy goes to his minister, Nyesom Wike, as a godfather, and himself, President Tinubu, having been a godfather in Lagos. The minor sympathy goes to Governor Fubara. President Tinubu doesn't want Governor Fubara to be impeached. So he had to look for a skillful way of pushing him aside for 6 months, intervene through this drastic measure, and then see if indeed the political atmosphere could be created whereby the governor will come back and eventually he's allowed to complete his term.
The problem, of course, is that the president had mentioned in that speech that militants had been threatening fire and brimstone against the perceived enemy of the governor. And the governor didn't come out to disown them or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's what I found very disturbing. Yes. The president said that, he says pipelines have been attacked without the governor doing anything. Yeah, but what did he expect the governor to do?
Well, besides, it just happened literally literally a day or so ago.
Yes, I mean, what did he expect? The governor is not in charge of the security forces.
Besides,
so what did he expect? And these people have been threatening over time that, look, if the governor is impeached, they were going to embark on this action and all of that.
But the concern now must be, is this action by the president? Because, I mean, as I said, we're getting reactions, and some of them pretty sort of heated reactions. Is it now likely to unleash that fire and brimstone that the president was trying to avoid?
And that's my fear, actually, because, I mean, nothing stops these people, these anti-state actors, from going ahead with, you know, their threats. And I can tell you clearly,
it as a victory for the other side, for the weaker side.
That's what I'm telling you, that they will think that the majority of the sympathy went to the weaker side. And the weaker group can actually claim to be victors in this circumstance. And Ibas, who's coming in, the administrator, will find it terribly difficult to govern that state because on a normal day, even under the military, these anti-state actors were very prevalent. They understand the state, the mangrove swamps and all of that, better than even the military, the Nigerian military. So if these militants go ahead and start blowing the oil pipelines and all of that, and it hurts the Nigerian economy, who's going to be the biggest loser? It is President Tinubu who will be the biggest loser because his 2025 budget will not scale through. Where will he have the money to run this? And this is what many of us had been saying on TV, on radio, as journalists, analyzing. As of last week, I mean, I was at that media interview. And we asked Minister Nyesom Wike, what if these people go ahead with their threat and blow the pipelines? Don't you think it will affect the country? And of course, his answer is where he has partially led us to some of the things happening. So I think the minister himself needs to calm down and talk to his people more in Rivers State. Mr. Nyesom Wike has a responsibility to make sure that the president's orders actually work through. Because if it doesn't contain some of the things he says, it will still not bring peace to the administrator for him to be able to perform optimally like the president wants. And of course, if we are not careful, the 6 months will be lost and wasted. But I believe that there could be a better political solution to this. And the National Assembly, if they intervene, and political leaders, this state of emergency will not even last more than a week or two.
So potentially,
yes,
given, and that's a very important point you just made now, because ultimately it's about finding a solution.
Yes.
Going forward.
Yes.
This could be an opportunity for a political solution.
Very good, because the National Assembly still has to approve the state of emergency. It's not an executive discretionary power alone. He has to officially write to the National Assembly stating that this is what I have done, and the National Assembly would either affirm it, and if they don't, of course, the president's action will be contained and it won't go far. So, but the APC, controls the National Assembly. The thinking is that whatever comes from the presidency will scale through. But there are some people, even in the National Assembly, that actually have sympathy for what's happening in that state. And if this case is not properly handled, it could be a trigger to other states. Does it mean that other states could have a situation whereby if there are political challenges and they can be resolved, that the APC-led federal government will keep on imposing state of emergency?
Especially if those political problems seem to be ranged in a, or at least perceived in a political way.
Yes, I mean,
by one party or the other.
Yes, that's why I said, actually, the president should have consulted more with the Attorney General of the Federation, and I don't think that the Attorney General would sit down, having looked at the laws and all of that, and say that this is the best solution. I'm thinking that this is more of a political decision than a legal decision. And I
can imagine the president probably, most likely would have consulted his attorney general.
Yeah, he would have consulted. The attorney general would have also given his views.
Right.
But I think the president will go ahead and
but it's up to the president to make his decision, whatever the
because it's more of a political decision than a legal decision. Because, like I told you earlier, people will question if indeed the chief executive officer of a state can be pushed aside for 6 months, and if the president who is elected and has a secure time, the governor who is elected and has a secure time constitutionally, what exactly is the governor going to be doing in those 6 months? Is he still a governor or not? Is the deputy still a deputy governor or not? Constitutionally, there are still governors and deputy governors. So that's why the thinking from other school of thought is that the governor and the deputy governor are supposed to be working hand in glove with the administrator to administer the martial law that has been put in place.
Well, there's got to be some period of handover, though. Somebody has to hand over to him, because he's coming from somewhere else. And
but does he have the experience of running the state?
Well, I don't know.
He doesn't. He's just a military man.
Unless he's just going to be a figurehead.
He's just going to. So who are those that will be administering the policies? The APC-led federal government administering the policies
of a
PDP state.
Yeah.
Those are the political interpretations that people will give to it. And this is a critical state, one of the 3 swing states in Nigeria that you need to win an election. Could it be a prelude to 2027 to weaken Rivers State so that it becomes much more easier for you to harvest the votes in 2027? Is it a warning signal to other opposition governors that if they don't toe the line of the governing party at the center, that they could also be victims of a state of emergency? These are political interpretations that people will give. But of course, like I said, no commander-in-chief will sit down and watch a state governor refusing to take action to curb the violence that we are seeing. And then the number one sin that the president cannot be forgiven, that the governor cannot be forgiven, is the decision to actually destroy the State House of Assembly building, because a lot of people have been saying 1 or 2 things about it, and the governor has not come out clearly to actually free himself of that allegation. So once you do that, the president can hide under that pretext and say, look, you have created a draconian situation where there's no State House of Assembly, the voice of the people, and so I have no choice than to also declare a state of emergency.
Sumner, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. It's great to have you here and to have the benefit of your analysis. Sumner Sambo is Arise Director of News, as you may know as well. He has been also the political editor at Arise News. And just to remind you, before we have to take a break, that the President of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has just addressed the Nigerian people regarding the situation in Rivers State. He said that in the circumstances, given the political crises that have been ravaging the state, in the circumstances that he had soberly reflected on and evaluated the political situation there. And in his words, the governor and deputy governor, having failed to make a request to him as president to issue, he's now bound to issue this proclamation as required by Section 305, subsection 5 of the 1999 Constitution as amended, and that it has become inevitably compelling for him to invoke that provision to declare a state of emergency in Rivers State. The upshot is that he has declared a state of emergency.
Just to add that Ibas is actually from Cross River State, not from,
Cross River State. Okay,
yes,
and that's an important point. And of course,
so guys, the recklessness of some of these our politicians sometimes is really so shocking. You know, the way Tinubu has been quiet, especially on the part of Wike. Nigerians were just wondering, why is the government, Tinubu said he has tried to mediate so many times and they seem not to listen to him. Did you ever caution Wike? Did Nigerians ever see you cautioning Wike? Did you ever tell Wike? Like recently, Wike came out to, started making all kinds of comments saying they will impeach Fubara, nothing will happen, that he's going to disgrace Fubara, he will drag Fubara, he would, all kinds of things. I don't know if you have listened to the speech he gave when he went to, is it Alabama or what, in Rivers State recently. He talked so much down on, on Fubara. And nobody said anything. Now, the president is saying he tried to mediate. Okay, you tried to mediate. It didn't work. Did you ever call Wike to please leave Rivers? Leave Rivers State alone. Leave Rivers. It's not his personal property. Leave Rivers alone. Just because the APC needs Rivers does not mean Rivers State should be burnt down. Not because 2027 presidential election is the campaign is about to kick off. That does not mean the people of Rivers must join the APC. Is it by force? They've chosen the PDP. And now you want them to forcefully join the APC. That's just what is playing out, nothing else. Wike is looking for a political structure that he can sell to anybody at any time during campaign. And he feels Fubara has disorganized that structure he built. And he's not happy. And so, you have reigned for 8 years. Do you think you are going to reign forever in Rivers State? Your regime ended last 8 years. You must not forever be in power. Now you finish first term, second term. You still want a third term. For that reason, Rivers State can burn. It does not concern you. So, guys, it's really so pathetic. Looking at the way these politicians think sometimes, they don't consider others. You can see politics in Nigeria. Politics in Nigeria is all about self-centeredness, selfishness. It's just about you. Whether other citizens of the state are going hungry. Like now, the state of emergency has been declared. Tell me why it will not affect petty traders who depend on daily sales to eat and to feed their families. Tell me how it's not oh my God. Like somebody said that, Rivers State is a state that produces oil, but its citizens are unemployed. So you have all these unemployed youths who depend on politics to feed. Now you've declared a state of emergency. How do you want them to go about their lives? Many of them now will start destroying the pipeline you don't want to be destroyed. So I think it's time for wisdom to have its way. Anyway, people have urged the National Assembly not to approve this emergency rule in Rivers State because the House of Assembly has got a role to play in this. People are telling the House of Assembly not to accept, what Tinubu has done in Rivers State. Rather, they should fix up all the mistakes that Tinubu has been seen to have committed or has been seen to have done in this Rivers issue. That the National Assembly should not accept this state of emergency and the removal of Fubara because the National Assembly has got a role to play in all this. Anyway, we are still watching to see how this play out. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell. Please give this video a like so that YouTube can recommend it to others. And drop your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you.